Hello and welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we head into our final segment of the day, breaking down the Boston Red Sox series win against the Texas Rangers. Now, from the perspective of the Red Sox, the sort of main theme of this series was the continued struggles with the tired arms for the Red Sox starters. Game 1, it was Cutter Crawford. Goes 5 1/3 innings pitched, 6 hits, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts, and 5 earned runs. He allowed 4 home runs in this game, which marked a record for the most home runs allowed by any MLB pitcher in 3 consecutive starts. He's now up to 12 in his last 3 starts, which is just first off a crazy statistic there, but the reason why he's even allowed to get this deep into these starts, to allow that many home runs, is because they're practically all solo shots, where 12 home runs, only 16 earned runs, or only 16 runs on those home runs, so it's just kind of crazy to see the fact that he just can't keep the ball in the park. Now, in the context specifically of this game for the Red Sox, they had a lead. They already had 9 runs on the board while he was on the mound. But it's so weird that during this stretch, 12 of the 21 hits that he's allowed have all been the long ball. And he's only walked 1 batter during this time. So it's not like he's getting himself into traffic and then he's getting burned. It's kind of an all or nothing thing with him right now, which definitely is not encouraging. You could also feel worse about it if it weren't the fact that, again, he's at least able to eat up some innings during this and not sort of put them out of the game altogether. But it's obviously a very different story if Crawford isn't getting the run support that he did in the beginning of that game as well. But then we saw Tanner Houck as well struggling, and he only pitched 5 innings, 8 hits, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, and 6 earned runs. So a lot more traffic, but didn't allow the same number of homers, of course, as Cutter Crawford, but overall it was kind of a worse start overall, and the 4th inning was really what got ugly for him. But Houck it's tough with him because he's been, since June or so, since the All-Star break at least, he has had a career high in innings pitched, and it's interesting. It's not like he's making excuses or anything that he's fatigued, but you do have to at least look at that number, and there's a chance he could have more innings pitched this season than the rest of his professional career combined. So, something that you at least have to take into consideration with Houck, and I think to some degree that might have been part of the thought process with Alex Cora for Game 3, where it was Nick Pivetta on the mound, and he ended up pulling Pivetta after just 70 pitches, which was the second lowest pitch total of Pivetta's season. He was doing fine for himself. He let up a couple solo home runs in the first 2 innings, but Cora walked out on the mound, sort of talked Pivetta down a little bit, and from there, it was a very clean game. Ultimately, though, Cora decided to pull him late in that 5th inning, and I think that it sort of speaks to the fact that the Red Sox understand they are going deep into this season with a pitching staff that doesn't have all that much experience. Brian Bayo is probably, they added James Paxton at the deadline, of course, that's your most experienced arm and most veteran arm, but other than that, Brian Bayo is probably the guy, and Brian Bayo is still just, 24, 25 years old, so they know that they're going to need to sort of err on a little bit more of the cautious side with a lot of these pitchers going down the stretch of the season, and especially as we are in August, we're headed into the last 2 months of the season, that the Red Sox are vastly overachieving expectations and are in the playoff hunt as things currently stand, 2.5 games back of the wild card. Now, a lot of these pitching struggles may be the biggest concern for them being able to work themselves back into a playoff position, but I do think that it just sort of spoke to me this weekend about the current situation of the rotation, and not really sure who you can point to out of the starters and fully trust at this point. Like, there isn't necessarily a name that can be on the mound and Red Sox fans can take a sigh of relief and say, okay, this one should be ours. That they're probably going to be, feel like, at least to some degree, outpitched for the remainder of this season. Now, we'll see ultimately about how all that plays out. They did, of course, look to revamp the bullpen a little bit with their trade deadline acquisitions. We saw both of those acquisitions actually pitch in this series. It was Lucas Sims who was stepped in and had another really good outing. This was in game one. He's been pretty much perfect for them so far. The bigger leverage situation was at the end of the Seattle series where he was able to get out of that first and third jam. But Sims was also a clean inning when he came in for the Red Sox versus Texas. And then we saw Luis Garcia also make his Red Sox debut, where it was a low leverage ninth inning that was already over the Red Sox with a significant lead. But he made pretty quick work of the Rangers in that inning on just 7 pitches, so really not a ton to talk about there necessarily, but at least for the sake of, those are names that they hope can take on a significant part of their role down the stretch of this season. You have Justin Slayton and Chris Martin, who are hopefully going to be back from injury as well, so you at least feel like there are a number of more options for the Red Sox headed into this final stretch of the season. Then Cooper Criswell is a name that I at least want to mention here. I think he's in a very interesting spot where he ends up getting bumped out of the rotation when they add James Paxton at the deadline as that 5th starter. Criswell has been an MLB, he is an MLB talent. He was kind of pitching just as well as anybody, I felt like, in the Red Sox staff, at least immediately before the Paxton trade. And it's just a debate around what role should he have at this point, because I do think he's an MLB talent. He, up to this point, since coming out of the rotation, he's had 2 lengthy appearances out of the bullpen in games that are already over, and that he's kind of just been an innings eater, and he's been efficient in those. It was 3 versus Seattle, where no hits, no walks allowed in game 2 of that Seattle series. Game 2 in this past weekend series against the Rangers, 8 up 2 innings in that one, and in both of those, the Red Sox are already significantly down, and again, it just feels like eating innings, and now maybe that's better than what they've had in the past of just sort of throwing out some guys that they are calling up from the minors to eat these innings, knowing that they're going to get hit around, that maybe you feel like if you throw Criswell in these games, he at least gives you a chance to maintain what the deficit is, and if the offense is able to do anything, then maybe you have a chance. But I don't know. I think that there's probably got to be a better way to utilize him, and I'm not exactly sure what that is, but, maybe using him a little bit earlier in these starts when it's before it's gotten out of hand would make those, inning-eating type of appearances at least feel a little bit better, that if you have a starter that's struggling, someone that's only able to go, 4-ish innings, like if Criswell ended up going for a little bit of a longer stretch when things were still a little bit more even with the Rangers in Game 3, maybe feel differently about the way he was used, but it is definitely a conversation, because I think the Red Sox are really going to have to rely on their bullpen throughout the rest of the season, because again, I just don't know how much their starting rotation is really going to be able to hold up, considering the fact that Crawford is about to pass his career high in innings pitched. Houck has been there for a really long time, and there's just nobody really that you feel tremendous about with Bayo, Pivetta, and Paxton rounding out that rotation. But a little bit more on the positive side here. Wilyer Abreu, what was incredible in this series, obviously caps it off with the 2 home runs in Game 3 that was really able to clinch that game and that series for them. 5 hits, 3 home runs, 7 RBIs in the series. But I do also just sort of want to look at the conversation about Rookie of the Year and why he isn't being mentioned more, because he has been an extremely positive player for the Red Sox all season. Outside of that brief stint with injuries that held him out, he's been producing just as much as anybody else when he's actually available for them. He is the highest wins above replacement out of any rookie this season. He is the second highest OPS out of any rookie with 100 or more plate appearances, behind just Tyler Fitzgerald of the Giants, so that wouldn't play any consideration into his American League Rookie of the Year conversation debates. And then he is third in RBIs in rookies, behind Davis Schneider of Toronto and actually his own teammate in Ceddanne Rafaela. So Abreu, he has all of the stats for it, and yet he actually, from this morning when I checked on the DraftKings website right now, and his odds actually have increased, and he's passed Wyatt Langford. So he's now sitting at 4th right now in American League Rookie of the Year odds. Colton Cowser is the leader right now. Luis Gil, 2nd. Austin Wells, 3rd. And then Wilyer Abreu. This morning when I had checked, he was tied with Rafaela actually at plus 1,500, but since then that's changed. He's now looking at plus 1,100. Cowser might just be, tough to beat. He had a big week, Cowser did. This past week, a 419 average, a couple home runs, 6 RBIs, 13 hits, 4 walks, and an 1,100 OPS. So Cowser is probably the pick here, but I don't know why Abreu hasn't gotten more conversations about at least the consideration of him winning the Rookie of the Year award. But let me know if I'm, looking at this from, Red Sox shaded glasses or what, but I think that he is very much in the mix, and he should be getting talked about being in the mix more often. But as for where the Red Sox stand coming out of this series, like I mentioned, 2.5 games back of the Kansas City Royals, and they now go into a series against the Royals. So this is going to be a big-time measuring stick moment for them in Kansas City for 3 games. And ultimately, again, I think that the Royals probably have the pitching advantage at this point. It's Paxton, Bayo, and the Game 3 starter is Cutter Crawford again. So we'll have to see at that point. But you're going to be facing, I would say, improved pitchers in Lugo and Reagans that the Royals are probably going to have the advantage here. Bats are going to need to come out hot. Talked about this last week, that their average with runners in scoring position really hasn't been great coming out of the second half, and they're scoring big, but they need to take advantage of opportunities when they come their way. So that's what I'm looking at for the Red Sox in this upcoming series. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. And we will be back tomorrow afternoon, same time as always at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. We will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn it.